welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Rina Zuckerman. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today, we have Pramod Bhatt. He works with RSG in the healthcare sector in France. And he is actually working on a book regarding geopolitical risk, global risks, what that means for industries. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would love to hear you tell us a little bit more about your background and how it brought you towards understanding the issues that you'll be addressing in your publication.
Thank you very much, Irina, for inviting me to this discussion. And just a quick background about myself, as you said, I'm in security sector right now, but my background started right from my army days when I was an officer in the military. And I've seen and even participated in a couple of wars. I've seen the action firsthand, geopolitical action happening, followed by a tenure in intelligence and then a couple of tenure with global security departments of multiple companies, ranging from banking sector to consulting to pharmaceutical sector as well. During this course, I've seen incidents like Fukushima nuclear crisis, Ukraine-Russia war, a lot of pandemic, and having seen this action, I probably started picking up more and more and better and deeper understanding of geopolitical conflict. And that what's motivated me, my lifetime experience, to write a book on making understand why these conflicts are happening, why this cycle is repeating again and again. What are the potential solutions for this to stop this cycle? And this book is all about to go into deep into the conflict, try to understand core reasons behind it, and then go for a solution. Because right now what is happening is the solution which were invented or which were framed mostly during Second World War or after Second World War, the geopolitical dynamics were different. Well, it has changed. So I think we need to probably up our game on this front as well. There has to be a rethinking how we deal with conflict.
Completely, and that's something that I've been thinking about recently myself. Amidst all the talk about the alleged end of the post-World War II order, I think a lot of people are trying to turn it into this dramatic crisis, and it can be. But on the other hand, evolution of critical issues is something natural. It happens as a result of time. It's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's not an issue, in my opinion, of blaming. It's an issue of preparation, evolution, evolving your own methods, and being responsive to new emerging security dilemmas and other concerns. So with that, I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, what has fundamentally changed in the nature of geopolitical risks over, since that time, and especially over the past decade?
Yeah, I think to understand what has changed and why it has changed, we have to go several centuries back. If we really want to have a good and sound understanding of this. If you look at historically, there have been several empires before. You talk about British Empire, overexpansion, and a lot of other issues. Then before that, Roman Empire, overexpansion, a lot of other issues. And then we have seen Ottoman Empire and many other empires. For these empires, the cycle of these empires, rise and growth and downfall, was a couple of centuries. And whenever these empires were entering a declining stage, there were a lot of upheavals. There were a lot of geopolitical instability. You can take an example of British Empire. Was at the end of it, we have seen World War, not only one, but two World Wars. Similarly, when Roman Empire was ending, it fragmented into two parts, Eastern and Western. And it also caused a lot of smaller wars all around Europe and Middle East. Right now, what we are seeing is we cannot say a similar empire, but probably one of the major dominant power, which is US right now, has probably achieving its peak, and it's at its peak. And Right now, what we're seeing, the empire is seeing kind of competition. And it's very natural for any major power to secure its place on the top. And this is where we see probably more upheavals going to happen. It's already happening, which we see trade barriers, Venezuela case or any other case. And that's quite natural. It happened before and it is happening now. So that's how, if you look at reference to bigger cycle, which we have seen, exactly we are seeing this cycle. But what has changed is cycle is becoming smaller. During earlier world, Roman Empire, the world was not so connected. Right now, we are so much connected, information flows within a second. Information reaches to a massive amount of people within a second. So things have changed, things have become more faster, and so are the cycle are going to be smaller and smaller.
Light of that, what do you expect to happen with these smaller cycles? How is that going to change the situation? What makes it different?
Yes, so let's take the example of for a power which is the most dominant power. So we say typically a dominant power has four important factors where it dominates. And those things are really important. One is military power. You can call it military supremacy when you're on the top of the world. So that is very important for any power to remain number one or to maintain dominant position. Second is economic supremacy. That is really important to maintain number one position. Third one is technology supremacy. That is critically now, as you know, technological supremacy is very, very important to maintain number one position. Fourth one is cultural power, soft power. So now what is going to happen is all these four factors, economy, technology, military, and cultural. US was dominating. I can give you an example, even for cultural power, US was dominating. For example, Hollywood movies at one point of time, their box office share globally was about 80% plus. Now it's declining, it's coming down. It's come down to 60s and probably decline more. Similarly, we have seen US dollar dominance. The international transaction which was happening with US dollar used to be 70-80%. It's come down to 60s and it's continuously declining. In fact, unfortunately, with the present geopolitical dynamics, countries are trying to go away from dollar more and more. So probably we might see acceleration of de-dollarization because of geopolitical factors, which we have seen. And then we talk about technological power. We already see what is happening to maintain number one position. There are restrictions being imposed on technology, whether you talk about chips, you talk about advanced tech, there are a lot of restrictions are going to come and which we've already seen. On the soft power, we saw significant decline, as we said clearly. And I am not seeing any signs or any indication where US is trying to maintain cultural or supremacy, which is not happening as of now. But other three fronts, there is going to be upheaval. We are going to see more economic issues coming up. We are going to see more military issues coming up. We are going to see more technological restriction coming up.
It can be argued that geopolitical risk is no longer episodic but structural. What does that mean for policymakers and for businesses and how they're structuring their future?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very critical and important question at this point, because I think historically for past few decades, when there was a global order, which were in fact installed by US after Second World War, there was a global order. We have seen episodic incidents, say Gulf War or 2008 financial crisis. They were episodic, like, it comes and goes. But what we are seeing right now is a more and more structured episode coming. For example, let's take an example of US-China rivalry. It's a structure episode. It's not episode, it's a structural issue because it's going to stay maybe another few decades or maybe half a century or more. And this rivalry is not going to go down. So this means for people or for companies which are depending on those supply chains which could be disrupted because of this structural issues or this rivalry between US and China, they must plan their resiliency around those. Very, very important thing for any company which are dealing with this. And there are certain other structure things which we see, for example, technological restriction. And this is not going to die down anytime soon. It was there before, but now it's more and more coming because of artificial intelligence and whole ecosystem, including chips and all restriction coming up. So if you depend on these technology, you really have to see how you can secure alternate sources or probably better develop in-house. We see some of the countries already initiated a lot of investment on this front. For example, I come from India. I'm based in Europe, but I see India is increasingly investing in artificial intelligence technology, including chip manufacturing, designing. So probably a fear is there in the world that many of these things will be restricted, and it's not going to be a short-term restriction. This will keep on coming. It's a long game, which is going to be disrupting many companies, many nations together.
Regard, given that we are seeing an intersection of economics, technology, and ideology becoming more and more intertwined, how does the understanding of geopolitical risk change in these circumstances?
So I think what I understand about this factor, ideology was there before as well. It's not a new thing. Every empire has different ideologies. Some people have religious part, some people have community part, and it's ever existed. I think since the time humans have got their wisdom or conscious, it has been there. It is going to be there. But what I have seen often is transactional or that tends to over dominate. That tends to dominate ideology many times, many times. So I can give you, for example, and it's a live example right now, but I'm being also neutral, but give you an example. For example, when you talk about some of the Islamic nations, for example, Pakistan is our very good neighbor. So they're driven by Islamic ideology. There's no doubt, and there's nothing wrong about it. But now, for example, Pakistan participating and taking a membership in Peace Board for Gaza. So, which is quite ironic because this means they are going in hand with Israel. So, which is very, very different case. They should not be going, as it should not be becoming part of that, but they are, because it's all about transition. It's all about business. It's all about money. So ultimately, we saw a real case where ideology is being dominated by transaction, by wealth and by power.
What role does technology play in all of this?
Can you repeat your question, please?
What role does the growth of the basically big tech role in global affairs, in politics, and even in the way they're shaping the military outcomes? How does it affect risk issues and risk management?
Yeah, I think it's quite a long answer, but I will try to keep it short. Multiple ways it could impact, and it's already impacting. Which we have seen. Old wars during Second World War or First War, you saw the trench war happening. People were trenched in trenches and then firing on each other. And we saw what happened during Second World War. French people were on the trench, German people on the trench, and the standoff went for months. Now, not the case. It's changing. With advanced tech, what we are seeing right now in, for example, Ukraine and Russia, they're just standoff, but there is a movement happening. There's a drone warfare. I think this war also accelerated development of autonomous weapons. which probably would have taken another 5, 10 years, but it's accelerated, and this happened in the last 2, 3 years. We see autonomous drone and AI powered drone, AI driven drone. So people don't need to manage it anymore, which we saw before when the US has their drones, somebody sitting in a closed container looking after the drone and then sending drone to Afghanistan or some other places, but you don't need humans anymore. It's AI driven. So it has accelerated a lot, and it's going to change whole battlefield situation, where you don't need so many human soldiers for this, probably especially when you're targeting, you're softening your target. So we see big change coming. And then there are autonomous robots, which are, you can call it killer robots. That's another factor which might come up in next few decades or maybe another decade, because AI coupled with AI brain with the robot is going to make them smart. Probably you don't need to have people fighting each other. Probably robot armies will fight with each other. As you can see, I think I was reading 2 days ago, there was a race of robots. And the robot which won was running at 22 miles per hour. So all this war, probably we see more and more fighting happening between machines, and whosoever machine wins, I think that becomes the winner.
It's an argument that US has focused excessively on chatbots, whereas China is actually advancing far more quickly on the robotics angle of this, and China may in fact win the AI race war because of that. How do you see that? Is that even a relevant point of comparison?
So if I look at AI, AI is a very long race. I don't see it as a race which is finishing anytime soon. And it's extremely difficult to say which country or which nation will win. There's nothing like a winning at this stage. It's a very, very early stage, very early stage. And there's not only AI, then you have quantum computing. You know how I define, sometimes people ask me, how do you think about it? So I say, if you see the movie called Iron Man, it has something called Jarvis. Jarvis is like AI progressing. And there's another character called Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is like a quantum computer, which can see, millions of outcome of one event, right? So when you have AI plus quantum computing, nations advancing in this field, they are going to, take a lead. But at this stage, I think, to me, it's just starting, because over a period of time, AI will help accelerate AI. AI will help accelerate quantum computing. AI will help accelerate biotech, human augmentation, many other things. So we will see which nation wins. But right now, if you talk about which are 4 or 5 nations which are ahead in the race, I think US is ahead, China is ahead. Some of the nations like Israel, India, couple of countries are catching up. Europe has started catching up as well, but it's burdened by regulations, so people are not so much motivated to do much of work on AI.
Interestingly enough, now that you mentioned it, I've had the conversations about the European regulatory landscape and the excessive burden that stifles innovation for the past several years in several different countries across Europe. And there is a general sense of agreement that is the case, and it's the quote-unquote bureaucrats who are holding up all of this and preventing these regulatory frameworks from being lifted sufficiently to help Europe catch up. To what extent do you really see that as a centralized Brussels-based problem, and to what extent is it an issue of other factors that are preventing Europe from moving away from that framework? I mean, are the populations concerned more about privacy than about innovation and economic advantages? Is it an issue of local tech giants who want the heavy regulation for whatever reason, or is it something else that's driving all of this?
Yeah, I think I give you slightly different perspective, probably which you will not see in media. I would say I'm so happy that there's Europe, which can have way to regulate things, which teach us how to regulate. Imagine if we didn't know about regulation. Imagine if we didn't have, expertise on this subject. We would have not have our data would have been all around. We would not have GDPR, data protection. We would not have many other. I think, thank God, Europe is there, so they have done a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, there are pluses and minuses. On the downfall side, yes, they're slightly behind. They are behind in AI. They are behind in many other tech. But when you look at tech in from the perspective of offensive technology like war, weapons, I think Europe has experienced worst during Second World War, during First World War. So they have their history behind it, and probably those memories motivate them to so that people don't misuse or weaponize these technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine, if we don't have any AI regulation, if this will be weaponized in the form of, it's already being weaponized. It's already being weaponized in the form of autonomous drone. Tomorrow it will be autonomous robots, killer robots. So good that they have it, but obviously they are the one who are also suffering because of regulation. But both has it's a one it's a both side of coin, plus and minus.
Well, I understand that there is some level of protection, given the fact though that weapon-related restrictions, if you look at AI as a weapon, tend to favor the those less willing to abide by the law. I'm not really sure that this race is something that is ultimately winnable by Europe. If other actors end up defining the landscape, had Europe been the first in line to set the tone, it may have gotten other actors to buy into that framework sufficiently to create a uniform regulatory landscape that would have prevented misuse. But given that Europe is lagging behind, it seems to me that the as a whole international regulatory landscape is being ultimately driven by the leading powers in that regard, and uh, regulation is probably not their first priority, which means that Europe is self-limiting itself in a way that is not advantageous in the current context, even though had Europe been leading to begin with, it may have helped stifle those risks that you just mentioned. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I agree partially, but now it's changing. Somebody has a question. I saw the okay.
Oh, no, that was I don't understand. This is actually the AI element. Every time someone lifts the hand, it interprets it as if it's a actually lifting a hand for the question. I think it's a bit much.
Okay, so I think I partially agree because now things are changing and things are changing for good. For example, Europe did realize this time that they were dependent too much on US and many other nations for their tech. And then they saw this whole dependency, interdependence is being weaponized against Europe itself. Greenland case or any other all of this case which happened, Europe being pushed to increase defense budget, etc. So they realize this. They need to have their own tech. They need to have. They need to move away from too much or interdependence or dependence on tech on US or any other nation, even China. And if you look at right now, European countries' defense budget, they've already gone more than 5% as per NATO desire, and many countries are now talking about to increase it further. So probably in the next few, it's not going to happen overnight, but you will see more investment coming from European countries' government on defense and then weapon manufacturing or AI. You will see more and more coming, and it's not going to slow down. It's going to increase and increase because they do think about long term. So I think I would say the direction have changed. So direction started changing. That's how we say how the world will be after 20 years is going to be probably more unstable when you have every country having so many weapons, every company country want to keep deterrence is going to create a lot of noise.
Yeah, noise is the worrying aspect of it. How much of all of this is going to be noise versus real accomplishment? But you know, given the fact that we are indeed hearing a lot of noise about a lot of different things, technology just being one of the leading factors, how much do you think are we in a moment of truly great danger and threat from different factors? Or are we simply more aware of risks than previous generations? And do we have, because we have more tools at our disposal, so are we creating the perception problem here? Is the world more dangerous now than it's been a few decades ago, or is it that we're just dealing with the threats differently?
I think for answering this question, probably I should do is probably talk about risk landscape as a whole. So because there's not only one risk, there are multiple variety of risks, and they are also interacting with each other. So if I have to divide the whole world facing similar risk, it can be grouped into two categories. One is geopolitical risk, and other one, the other set of risks. So when I talk about geopolitical risk, let's talk about number one risk, which is global divide. And this is, everybody knows it now, because for a few decades, there was a world order largely driven by United States. From 1991, USSR disintegrated. It was probably slightly more stable because the world was unipolar only for a few decades. Now what we see here, the world order is changing, and everybody knows it. Whenever there have been, two big blocks during Cold War, for example, there is going to be friction between them, and it's already happening. Right now, we see the friction between China and US, and whenever there's a friction, there's a fallout. Friction between US and China is trade barriers, many other things. So friction between Russia and US, or Russia and NATO, that's also caused war in Ukraine. So this is going to continue, and because China is not going to go down, it's going to grow and grow. So friction is going to increase. The second set of risk is coming from regional divide. And when I say regional divide, one is global players, then there are regional players. I give you an example. When you talk about east part of the world, is China versus Philippines, China versus Japan, China versus South Korea, China versus Taiwan, China versus India. I mean, where China want to dominate Asia region as well. So there's a friction between, and that friction is also going to cause a lot of risk. For example, supply chain risk from Taiwan, in case China decide to do more blockades. Sometimes they have been doing it. So we see more and more issues propping up that side. On the Middle East side, we have seen a big friction between two blocks. One block is Saudi and its allies. And when you say ally, is UAE and many other nations. And then you have Iran and its proxies all around. So who wants to lead maybe Islamic world? We can call it that way. So who wants to become a regional dominant player in Middle East? So there's a friction between Iran and its proxies and between Saudi and allies. And this is causing, again, a lot of noise. We know Houthi rebels is an issue where Saudis are been bombing, and these rebels are supported by Iran. We see a lot of friction, and there's a huge outcome for anybody and everybody in that area. So this is kind of regional divide, which we see more and more. The third thing which is happening is, because of this global divide friction and this regional friction, a lot of countries are failing. A lot of states are falling apart. There's no governance. For example, Libya, Syria, Yemen, the many other countries on the in Africa and Middle East where there's no governance, they fell apart because of this geopolitics. And it's causing a lot of risk. People have no source of income. They are moving out to have a better opportunities, or to have some employment or some money. Along with them, we also see sometimes some people who are radicalized, they also move in to countries like Europe and causing a lot of issues. So we see this friction resulting in a in a big issue. So these are like set of geopolitical risks, which is going to define more and more risk in this part of the world. Second set of risks are non-geopolitical. There are no boundaries for them, and they are all around. And one of those risks is climate change. Climate change we have seen for last few decades. It was picking up well. People started cooperating. We saw initially Paris Agreement where the agreement was signed, but what we see right now is it has taken a reverse direction. The fund which were promised by nations to, were not delivered. U.S. has pulled out from that treaty agreement, so which is again causing a big issue on the climate change, and it's not going to decrease anytime soon. We already see, Spain has a drought issue a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and then there are flooding issue which we see in Europe. A lot of climate issues which we will continue to see, and with U.S. again, U.S. is supposed to be holding this, but they have also taken a reverse direction of digging more, going for more oil. So probably that is set as different example on the reverse direction. Second set of risk is artificial intelligence and cyber attacks, which is again a big concern. And I don't want to discuss much because everybody knows it about it. AI, misinformation, and many other things. AI empowering drones and robots, etc. That's a big risk which is coming. But it obviously has a lot of advantages than disadvantages. We'll see how we can manage it. Even nuclear has a lot of disadvantages, but we use it for nuclear power as well. The third thing which is becoming more concern, which you said initially, ideology, right? So what we see, the societal divide is increasing. It's increasing in Europe, far left, far right. Now, it used to be many government here used to be center right or center left or center. So it was like maintaining kind of equilibrium. But right now it's disbalancing. Whenever you have two extremes, there is going to be more friction between them. This is exactly what we see right now in US. Probably it is more polarized society where you have far right Democratic, and then far right Republican and far left Democratic. I don't know how you compare with Europe, but this is how what we happening. Probably we see societal divide is going to increase and increase, causing friction. So we see a lot of protest demonstration happening, a lot of violent crime happening. We already see here in Paris, for example, every week there's a protest. Every weekend there's a protest causing disruption. So far localized, but it's not going to stop anywhere. It's going to increase and increase.
Well, given this fragmented risk landscape, given all these different issues that we are facing, how do you see this being managed by countries that have gotten used to a unipolar or bipolar risk landscape? I'm not talking about whether, the world is multipolar in terms of power. I'm talking about risks specifically to this fragmented situation where not only do you have the blocks that you managed, but you have friction within those blocks, like currently the Saudi UAE competition, rivalry, whatever you want to call it, like the internal European rivalries between some of the Western and Eastern European countries that are more pro-independence or pro-Western, so to speak, and others that are closer to Russia and China, for instance. And that's just an example for the fragmentation. There are also fragmentations that are not geographical in nature, but exist between other competing factors.
I think every nation or every individual, in fact, when we talk about this fragmented related conflict or any other conflict, they should look at why it is happening. Has it happened before? So I again always try to go several centuries back and then look at what we can learn from our several centuries of experiences. It has happened before. It will happen. But when you look at overall, you will mostly find two core reasons behind it. One is desire for more. And this desire can be a desire of an individual, desire of a community, desire of a nation, desire of a full country, right? So desire for more means desire for more wealth, more resources, more and more, right? More land, more territory, more technology, right? The second factor, which is causing a lot of conflict and the core reasons, is desire for dominance. You can call it dominance, you can call it supremacy, you can call it multiple ways. Supremacy is like extreme form of it, but my way or the highway. So, for example, if my thinking is that democratic form of the government is the best form, I want to tell everybody else that, oh no, you do govern this way, not your way. If somebody is doing communist way or autocratic way, they will say, no, my way is the better way. You also do this way. So desire for dominance, people want to dominate, and dominance doesn't happen on the form of governance. It could be religious, it could be many other forms of dominance. You can look at any war which happened before. You can look at any conflict. You can look at conflict not only at a national level, but between two people, between two communities. You'll always find these two factors, one or the or maybe both. So unless we don't think about how do we address this, we will end up doing bandage work. Like we are trying to fix all these conflict in a very temporary way, and then it comes back again. And it is happening with Ukraine, Russia, for example, 2013, and then there was Minsk Accord. It was a band-aid, nothing happened. It came back again. Right now, what we're trying to do, again, looks like a band-aid to me, which I have heard and seen those terms and conditions. It doesn't provide a long-term solution, or it's not addressing the desire and dominance factor. That needs to be addressed properly. And how do we address this? It has to be a multifaceted approach, and that's how the book which I am writing, The Forces of Desire and Supremacy Shaping Our World, has the core element. It digs deep into what is desire. We have to dig deep, look at psychological, philosophical, biological, many other reasons, dig deep into it. Look at dominance, why it happened, what it caused, how it can be managed, how it can be neutralized. So once we learn deep into this, and then we also look at today world is not the world which was there before. We have social media. You mentioned about technologies. We have digital media. It is amplifying everything. There are echo chambers all around. Any news or any negative or anything which gets attraction, it gets multiplied quickly. So this desire and dominance is actually multiplying right now with the help of digital technologies. Now, how do we manage it? What should country do about it? So it has to be I would say, three-pronged approach. One is individual level. An individual level could be even for you and me, right? How do we manage our desire? Do we understand it well? And there are multiple ways of doing it. I will not go much into this because this is well covered in my book as well. Can the leader of big nations do some of this individual practices of managing their own desire? Because people in a country don't want war. It's primarily the government, the leaders, right, which prompt them, which motivate people into that, which bring them to, are the leaders do they know what desire they are playing with? So we need to address that part first. Second part is, nations. As a nation, we say always resiliency is the mantra. Because we are going to see more and more such thing happening, and its structure is going to stay. It's going to stay. These risks are going to stay. So nations need to think about how they can be more resilient, how they can build resilience. In companies like us or any other large multinational company, every company has a department called resilience department. And they do build their business continuity plan. They do have business impact assessment, etc., and they do have a lot of planning around this. But when I look at nation as an entity, they don't have something which we can measure. We cannot say, is US resilient? Is France resilient enough from the conflict? Is Italy resilient from global conflict? We don't have this. And that's what I'm trying to put in my book. And I put a method to do it by developing something called Global Conflict Resiliency Index. And that has 10 pillars. And these 10 pillars needs to be measured. And that's how we will be able to define, are these nations having those 10 pillars, where are they? And then we can measure their resilience. Some of these pillars I can tell you, for example, are they really working with global institutions? Are they participating? Some nations are pulling out, for example, US, which is probably weakening its own resiliency. Are we encouraging regional alliance? Because many regional alliances are more successful in solving conflict. In fact, European Union itself is an alliance, right, which emerged after Second World War, and Europe became more peaceful itself. African Union, ASEAN. ASEAN has a good example. Some of their local conflicts are being solved by these regional alliances. But are we really promoting it? Are we joining them? Are we encouraging them? Very less take on that front, but we're not focusing on that. Are we addressing the root cause, like poverty, inequality? I talked about last time during conference. In US, for example, the wealth gap is increasing. It's the highest for last 50 years. Gini coefficient is 0.48, which is the highest one right now, which for the US for the past 50 years. Are we addressing climate change together? Are we collaborating? Are we harnessing technology for peace building? We're harnessing technology right now more for creating tension, more for probably military use right now, but less for peace tech adoption. So we have to think about how we can do that. Are we going for disarmament? Second of Cold War came down as well, because a lot of disarmament happened during that time, whether the START treaty between US and USSR, a lot of nuclear treaties, which actually cooled down that time, the tension. But right now we're in a different direction. We're not bringing down weapons, we're increasing it. The defense budget of almost every country has shot up like anything. So that resilience pillar is going down and down. When every nation have a lot of weapons, they're not going to keep quiet. They're going to use it imperatively, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that resiliency pillar is going down. Culture exchange is going to decrease. It's decreasing already. We see, for example, a lot of culture exchange happening before. For example, I remember last year's record, or before that year, you will see a lot of students going to US. And this year, I see students are decreasing. More and more cultural exchanges are decreasing, which is again going to decrease the soft power of a nation. International forums are becoming more unipolar. A peace board is, to my perspective, is probably a unipolar stuff, because you have one person who has all the power in that board. We have seen even in United Nations, a model which was made for UN Security Council was five nations had power because of Second World War dynamics during that time, and it's falling apart right now. So, but similarly, if there is no equal share, or what we call, vote of voice share is not equalized or proportionalized, that is also weakening. So a lot of resiliency pillar for nations to work on and think how they can do it. And based on these factors, I have done things like, devise something called inclusive governance score, regional diplomacy capacity, root cause mitigation index, which has also include income inequality like Gini coefficient, human development index, etc., climate cooperation index, economic interdependence index. One of the reasons during this that countries were economically interdependent. So there was a theory that war doesn't happen when people or countries are economically dependent. But right now we're delinking. We are killing it with trade barriers, with monopolizing or weaponizing this interdependence. Peace tech adoption score, disarmament, armed compliance score, a lot of human-centered progress index. So when you combine together, it becomes a global conflict resilience index.
So there are some people who stand to gain from global conflict, but I don't just mean defense companies. Frankly, I think defense companies do well regardless of the threat landscape, because there's an inherent drive to be superior, even at times of peace, in some cases. But I think demagogues and media benefit from conflict, from playing up negative situations and fear, situations that generate fear. Um, so you mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned this idea of economic interdependence, also globalization. To what extent are we witnessing the collapse of old risk models around those two topics? And to what extent are we actually becoming more globalized and interconnected in some ways? Because as I see it, technologies, no matter who produces them, are not going anywhere. People looking to create superior competitive fields are going to cooperate regardless of official government policies. Exchanges are taking place and influence is taking place, even if the official rhetoric is going in the opposite direction. And quite frankly, this deglobalization language coming from some corners, not just in the US, by the way, but also in Europe and elsewhere, I think a lot of it is more rhetorical than actual because no one has stopped. Very few countries completely self-isolated in terms of internet, and things like that. You can count them on one hand, literally. Everybody else is still using global communication, seeking to project power globally, seeking new markets and seeking advantages that come from it.
Yes, so I think it depends how you define globalization. But I've heard many times people talk about globalization, and then when I ask them, how do you define it? They say, yeah, trade, countries doing trade. I say, no, that's not the only part. This is one of the aspect of globalization. A true globalization is not only about trade. Trade is, of course, one factor. It's about trade. It's about cultural exchanges. It's about people moving into each other countries. It's about exchange of languages. It's many other exchanges like going beyond boundaries, right? To me, true globalization is that it should be the true definition of globalization. When we are really interdependent, it's not only for some trade or that way. So now, what is happening here? We're seeing that kind of a true globalization is breaking apart. And I gave you factors. Cultural exchanges are decreasing. There are many other factors which are going to cause reduced globalization. But if you talk about only about trade, it is going to remain. It is going to remain. To me, my understanding, I haven't seen any century where trade was not there. You can look at, maybe we have a history of maybe 20th century written, last 20th century. Trade has always been there. Even between nations who were fighting, they were trading, right? So it was there, it will remain, but it will be more transactional. No more cultural exchange, no more true globalization. That true globalization is going away. And that's a big concern for everyone and everyone.
So in that sense, are you seeing that competing nodes and blocks that are emerging, are they going to be presenting a permanent state of instability, or do you see that they could actually at some point stabilize one another, or are they, by nature of who those blocks are, naturally they're naturally threatening to one another, and or at least in terms of perception, if not intention, and are likely to lead to tensions no matter what happens?
Yes, so I think there's a lot of debate ongoing on this issue. What will happen in a multipolar world, right? When you have more blocks, more powerful blocks. And at time, I have seen people comparing that multipolar world with the world which was there before First World War or before Second World War, because that's a time when they try to compare, saying, "Oh yeah, there were like Dutch Empire, British Empire, Spanish Empire, and French Empire, multipolar. They call it, there were multiple blocks, and they fought among each other and caused destruction." But I don't buy that theory because that's not the dynamics here at the moment. Here, multipolar is true multipolar. We're not talking about a few powers of one continent. It's not multipolar. In multipolar senses, you have, one way China, one way India, one way Europe, one way India or China, all these different blocks all around the world comprehensively. That's probably a true multipolar in one sense. So we cannot compare with what was there during before World War, because it was only European powers, only few countries, not all. So I think that probably is there's no need to fear on this. Yes, multipolar world, if it emerges well, I think what I see, probably the progress will slow down. Progress will slow down, and because there will be less exchanges of technology, because everybody would want to confine their technology to themselves. Probably there will be less sharing, because I said there's no beyond boundary, there's no true globalization. But we might also see period of smaller issues, but not larger issues. When there's a balance of power, balance of power is divided between equitable, between multiple nations, probably you will not see big war happening, not like a world war or big wars. But obviously there will still be friction between them, but those friction may not result in a world war, to be in a very nutshell.
Still, short of a global war, there are many potential concerns and dangers that may come in, and that's causing people to re-examine the relationship between great power competition in particular and regional conflicts. And how do you see this happening? Because just because US and China are competing among themselves doesn't mean that they're also not competing in other spheres and regions, but it just means race for introducing their technologies, trade, race for critical minerals, or AI, of course, and or energy and power.
I think they will do it, and it's very natural. I said previous empire did it,
Mhm.
so they will also do it. There's no doubt about it. And then that's how we say, because we know now at least they will do it. So we have to be more resilient. Every nation has to be more resilient from that impact. And most of this are very visible. And I said clearly, a forefront, which was military, technology, economy, and cultural. So these factors are going to be unstable, and every country needs to build resilience. What will happen on this front? But the emphasis which I want to really give, and then probably the global think tank or people who are into conflict resolution, is we need to think something new. We need to go for a new way of resolving conflict, which actually addresses desire for more, and my way or the highway, the dominance, and which is not happening right now, because we are still stuck in our old way of resolving conflict. These ways, we know diplomacy is one of the way. There are a lot of other theories which have been there, but we still stick to those methods. We need to really think about more innovative, updated method, which encompasses today's reality, today's power dynamics, and go for that way of resolving. And that's how in my book I developed something called universal conflict resolution model. It's a very stepwise approach. It doesn't mean that you have to take all the steps, but it's the simple approach is primarily looking at the background. There are multiple steps, but in nutshell, I can tell you in 3 steps. Look at the background, why it's fallen apart, what happened, who are the key players, etc. And then when you really want to address, I've seen the 3 key levers which are really important. And one of them is narrative control. I think narrative is one of the biggest factor which has to be tackled in a much better way, the way we are tackling right now. We're not tackling right now. We are, I think, going in a reverse direction when it comes to narrative, addressing narrative. Second one is about your economic integration. We are moving away from that as well. and it's a proven theory when nations are better globalized. I'm not talking about only economic factor, but true globalization, which is going away. That was a strong lever which world has, where people exchange, culture exchange, trade exchange was there, which is again declining. So that lever is really important to become more and more strong. Third lever is security. The fear of insecurity is a bigger factor right now. Every nation is building stockpile of weapons because there's a fear of insecurity. Even the nation who would never thought of that they will build up stockpile their weapons, they're doing it now. So that fear of insecurity should go away. And how? There are methods and ways to do it. And that's how I build this model. And then I say, also, when you have done this, you are to need to manage the implementation barrier, which can come in the form of spoilers. There are self-interest groups. There are lack of trust, lack of verification process. So we have to really think in a very innovative, a fresh approach to resolving conflict, where this model, which I try to develop, could be useful for anyone who is into resolving conflict. And the model is so made in a way that even if there are two people are fighting, there's a dispute between two people, if they go with a very basic approach, applying three levers, narrative, security, and economic interdependence, they can probably solve conflict among themselves.
What do you think? Which regions and what issues, in your opinion, are most misunderstood when it comes to emerging risks, whether they're geopolitical or anything else?
I think if you talk about philosophical, we are ourselves a risk. Our desire is the biggest risk, right? And that desire interpolates to society desire of community, desire of a nation. That's the biggest risk. We really need to know much better about this and try to manage it. If we really want to manage any risk, and if today there's a risk about technology, tomorrow something else will come up. Yesterday it was two militaries fighting. Today it's about technology war. Tomorrow it will be a currency war, which is coming soon. So wait for a few decades, currency war, which will happen. So war will keep changing, but the fundamental behind will remain same unless we don't address those. Today there's some risk, tomorrow there's something else.
Well, this was extremely thought-provoking. I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Speaking of which, could you tell, for the record, the full name as it's going to be published, where you can, when do you expect to have it out, and where our audience can find it to order it?
Yeah, thank you for this promotion. So my book name is Beyond Boundaries: The Forces of Desire and Supremacy Shaping Our World. It is going to be available on Amazon sometime early June or May, likely to be in May or June. They will be able to find it, but I can send you the link once it is published, and you can send it to your audience.
Excellent. I really look forward to reading it, and I think our audience will as well. It sounds like not only tackles a number of interesting issues from a new perspective, and a constructive perspective, not just simply describing the problem, but also understanding what it is. But it also provides effective, measurable solutions and tools to at least start addressing these concerns in a meaningful way. And I think that we could use a lot of that. Thank you so much for joining us. Pramod Bhatt, please look forward to his book and look out for the link, which I will share once it becomes available. And we'll be back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio next week, 9 p.m. EST, as usual. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.